Hey, it's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in beautiful Fresno, California, the heart of the Central Valley, and the Central Valley being the heart of the state of California. As I say each week, we got a lot of heart going on, and I hope that you started your day with a lot of heart. I hope as you were lying in bed this morning, just prior to opening your eyes, that you claim God's goodness for you to demonstrate in your day-to-day, because this day absolutely is a gift from God to each and every one of us. Our journey, if you will, our duty, if you will, is to recognize that as truth and take that truth and put it into practice in our day-to-day life experience. That's what we've been talking about, particularly these last, this would be the fifth week now, I guess. We've been talking about the introductory chapters to what we call the textbook, The Science of Mind, written by Dr. Ernest Holmes, the thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. We took 2 weeks to cover what it does, and we're going to take 2 weeks to cover how to use it. We could probably take more, but I think I can get it, at least a good understanding in the 2 weeks that we're going to cover how to use it. How to use it. What are we talking about? Well, in the introductory chapter, it's the thing itself, and the thing itself is what we understand God to be in our life: spirit, first cause, universal intelligence. There's many different ways to address this thing that we call God. Calling it the thing itself is only one. Calling it God is another way. What the amazing thing about this is the idea, the understanding that we actually have within our own individual life experience, expression, the ability to align ourselves with God, if you will, on a spiritual plane, and to put God's goodness into practice in our life in a way that we have control over. And that's when we talk about how to use it. That's what we're talking about. You know, Ernest Holmes wrote this book in 1938, and then he wrote the introduction, the 4 chapters, after completing the book. Of those 4 chapters, probably the most important is the one that we're going to be covering now, how to use it. I mean, understanding that God is a oneness everywhere present. There's a universal, infinite unity, if you will, of which we are a part of, and it expresses as life through us. But how to use it is, I can't even begin to approach a way of explaining how important this is, not only for us as individuals, but for us as humanity. And we've, as humanity, have tended to overlook this. There have been teachers throughout history that have talked about how to use this, if you will. There have been teachers that have given some pretty good instructions and lessons, and one of those, of course, is that individual that we call the master teacher, Jesus. And Jesus, in his day, brought some really powerful, incredible teachings into the world, of which a lot of what he taught, a lot of what he presented to the world, and a lot of what he did was later overlooked by basic dogma and theology because it didn't fit the narrative, if you will, that was put forward at that time. And yet the teaching has never been lost. The genius of Dr. Holmes, and he was an incredible thinker, spiritual leader, but his genius really lay in his ability to look out into the universe of spiritual teachings and to aggregate and collect and put it into a concise teaching and understanding of which he called the science of mind and spirit, this understanding of what we call the truth. And as you've watched the shows in the past, and as you watch and continue to watch, and I hope you do continue to watch in the future, this thing that we call the truth. In other words, there's one absolute truth, and it's not that Dr. Holmes claims to have the definitive definition of truth, because in fact the truth is infinite in all that it is, and we can understand our own embodiment of that, but not necessarily wrap our minds around the totality, even though there's some people and groups that have claimed to do so. It's not that we claim to do that, but there's certain principles that are based in truth teachings that when we apply those principles into our day-to-day life experience, that we have the ability, we have the power, we have the way to open up our own individual expression and to create for us in our life a greater livingness. And in truth, that's our purpose. We were created to live life and to live it more abundantly, to bring more livingness into our individual life experience. And so today, as we move forward in this, we're talking about how to use it. I'll refer to some other New Thought teachers probably throughout the show today, but I want to start with the introductory chapter in how to use it. Dr. Holmes says, one of the great difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. As a matter of fact, we only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. That which we cannot prove may or may not be true, but that which we can prove certainly must be and is the truth. That which we can put into practice. And it's important to understand that what we're looking at, what we're studying, what I'm teaching here is a practice. In the front covers of the more recent editions of the Science of Mind textbook, they call it a philosophy of faith, a way of life. It is a way of living this for sure. And it's a way that only demonstrates in our life when we put it into practice. And as I've said many times in the past, and if you take the time to read Dr. Holmes's writings, you'll see that one of the things that he puts a lot of emphasis on is practice, putting it into practice. And we'll touch more on that today. But we have that power. This is what we need to know, that we can and we do have the ability to do that. But it's also important to know that it's not a giveaway. There are principles, and we have to align ourselves with principles. Thinking of the principle of electricity, for example. You know, when it was just lightning, all it was potential. When Benjamin Franklin figured out that somehow we could harness it, it still was just potential. But over a period of time, a long period of time, individuals have taken this principle and put it into practice in various different ways, creating various different outcomes, from things of like lighting and electric motors and batteries and so on, and moving into a more advanced, higher level of understanding of electricity into what we call electronics and what that's brought into the world in the tech industry and so on. This is all under that greater principle of electricity. Spiritually, we have a principle of first cause, which is creative. And likewise, in our basic understanding of it, it has potential. But until we begin to recognize that it's something that we can utilize, going back to the metaphor of electricity again, the understanding that Benjamin Franklin brought to the world when he was able to demonstrate that electricity through his experiment could actually be captured. It's the same way in our spiritual life. We are spiritual beings expressing in a physical plane. Our truth is greater beyond this physical plane in all directions. In fact, as a spiritual beingness, if you will, we are on some level infinite. And that's part of what we teach. But most importantly, for our journey here in this physical plane is to understand our relationship with truth, our relationship with God, the divine principle. And as we understand that, as we put it into practice, and we're actively encouraged to do that, then we'll see demonstrations in our day-to-day life experience. I want to read something, and this is out of a book called The Pathway of Roses, written by Christian D. Larson. He was another early pioneer in the New Thought teachings, and actually he also was a teacher to Dr. Holmes. And he says, "Your life," and this is found on page 1 if you're looking for a direct reference. He says, "Your life is in your own hands. You may live as you wish. You may secure from life whatever you desire, because there is no limit to life, no limit to your capacity to live. The elements of life can be modified, changed, developed, and perfected to comply with your own supreme demand. The increase of life can be realized in the exact measure of your largest need. You are living in touch with the infinite life, and there is neither limit nor end to the source of your supply. Now, that's a pretty big statement about what we can expect. And we'll take our first break, and we'll talk about it when we come back.
With Organic Pastures Raw Milk, you're getting a product that has been meticulously managed from grass to glass. From our pastures to our dairy, creamery, and distribution, we work hard to produce a product that is safe and clean for you.
Chef Big Will presents the original Bonton Cafe. Stop by 7307 Highway 49 North in Mariposa for the best blackened or southern fried catfish. Go and eat good food and sweet drinks, including but not limited to Cajun and Creole, smoking barbecue, hush puppies, fried pickles, alligator tail, etouffee, prime rib, tri-tip, po' boy sandwiches, crawfish, oysters, fried okra, and so much more. Daily lunch and dinner specials. Sunday brunch from 10 to 2. Enjoy the taste of New Orleans at the original Bonton Cafe. And see their full menu at theoriginalbontoncafe.com.
The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find the Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
Harness the power of the sun and cut your electric bill down to size with Soltech Solar. Call today and request a free quote at 559-325-6907 or visit soltechsolar.com.
Looking for work? Tired of minimum wage? For as low as $200, become certified as a forklift driver at the Certified Forklift Training Center. Call 559-325-8097 or visit cftc.net.
Fresno Dixieland Society presents the Sounds of Mardi Gras, February 7th to the 10th, 2019, at the Doubletree by Hilton. Get your tickets today. For more information, go to FresnoDixie.com or call Linda at 209-534-1924. Again, that's 209-534-1924.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, and we're talking about how to use it, the 4th chapter of the Introduction to the Science of Mind. This is part 1, and we're going to move forward here. Before we went to the break, I read you a quote from Christian Larson, which he says, "There is neither limit nor end to the source of your supply." Mighty big words, but there's a lot of truth behind them. You could even say there's an infinite truth behind them. But we got to understand our role in that, our position within this. You know, the Bible tells us that we were created in the image and the likeness of God, in the nature of God, if you will. And Jesus tells us it's done unto us as we believe. And all these things come together as we put it into practice in our use of our position within the law, if you will. So Holmes goes on to say, he says, "Of course, the theory of any scientific principle goes beyond its application. At any given stage of the unfoldment of that principle and the evolution of its accomplishments. If this were not true, there would be no progress in any science. The sources are objectively real to us only insofar as we demonstrate them, and until demonstrated, they are suppositional." Remember what I read in the first paragraph. You know, what we can prove we know to be true. What we can't prove may or may not be true. It becomes important that we actually attempt to put proof by practice into our day-to-day life experience. He says, "If there is any field of research where practical application is necessary, it is in the metaphysical field, the reason being that the principle of metaphysics seems less tangible to the average person than does the principle of any sciences." We get that. You know, it's been relegated to that field of mythology, if you will, of storytelling and religion and so on, that that people talk about but don't accept as a tangible part of their day-to-day life experience and expression. He says, all principles are intangible, but the world at large has yet to come to consider the principle of mental practice in the same light that it considers other principles of life and action. And we'll go back to the principle of electricity. People understand the principle of electricity. We accept the principle of electricity. The principle of spirituality, the principle of divine first cause, the principle of metaphysics, maybe not so much, right? And where are you at in your life today? So he goes on to say, its apparent intangibility is lessened whenever and wherever anyone actually demonstrates the supremacy of spiritual thought force over apparent material resistance. In other words, what he's saying is, when we prove it, we see it unfold, our believability factor, if you will rise. Remember what I said. It's done unto us at the level of our belief. Okay? If we can only believe a little, it's done unto us only as a little. But we don't want to live a life that is constrained by little belief. We want to live a life that is promoted, that is energized by greater belief. We want to see greater good demonstrated in our life. And the reason why we want to see more than anything else is there is a divine urge within us to express life and to express life in a greater way of livingness. That urge is there no matter who you are, no matter what your individual beliefs are, whether you have a particular religion or whether you happen to be an atheist. It doesn't make any difference. If you pause and reflect within yourself, that desire to live life greater is there. And you can call it divine, you can call it just a matter of science. It doesn't make any difference. It's there nonetheless. And what we're here to do is talk about putting it into practice. So he says, it's easy enough to rush about shouting that there are no sick people, but this will never heal those who appear to be sick. One of the things that, as we come to this philosophy, and we talk about demonstration, we talk about putting it into practice, and people get all excited, and they utilize their affirmative prayer treatment. We talked a little bit about that. In that utilization, they make declarations, and they feel that by the mere fact that they've done that's all they need to do. And it's not so. What we need to do is see a demonstration. If we're not seeing the demonstration, then we got to kind of wind it back a little bit. And in the field of mechanics, we got to do a little troubleshooting. And that's part of what Holmes was talking about in this particular chapter is us recognizing that, because I want to step aside here for just a minute. Holmes wrote this for two purposes. He wrote it as kind of a Cliff's Note for people that had never understood or had never experienced New Thought, but he also wrote it as a source of refreshment for people that have been putting this into practice in their lives in day-to-day life experience. And if you pause as you read this to really reflect upon the depth of what he's saying, you'll see that there's a whole lot there more than what the initial introductory reader will get from it. So we go back to it. He says here, there's no doubt about the immutability and the availability of the law. The law is infinite. It is right where we happen to be at any given time. It occupies all space and fills every form of with differentiation of itself. The law also flows through us because it flows through everything. And we've talked about this a little bit in the preceding lessons, okay? And it must flow through us in order to manifest for us. And that's important that we need to get that. The law, that response to the word, so to speak, that which is the in-between the speaking of the word and the physical manifestation. This is the kingdom of the law. And the law is always there, and it always is responding to the word, whether we are aware of it or not. And this becomes critical as we move forward. He says it's been proved that by thinking correctly and by conscious mental use of the law of mind, we can cause it to do definite things for us, through us. Do you notice the words that he started with? It has been proved by thinking correctly. You know, a lot of people will read that and they'll go, oh yeah, I get that. You know, we've got to think correctly and stuff. Thinking correctly is not something that we do when we're doing treatment. Thinking correctly is not something we do when we're doing our active meditation. Thinking correctly is not something that we do, sometimes. Thinking correctly is something that we must embody as an all-the-time thing. And it's multidimensional. And oftentimes little emphasis is given on the necessity of the realization of what thinking correctly means in our experience. So moving forward here, he says, we give conscious direction to it, the law, and it consciously or unconsciously responds to our advance along the line of our conscious or subjective direction. In other words, if we're reading and studying and we're working with like-minded new thought individuals, maybe we're doing treatment or whatever, we think, okay, we got it, we're working on it. But if in the in-between we allow our consciousness to be distracted, and distracted is a good word, because maybe we have a conscious desire to move forward. We may have a conscious desire to experience greater good in our life, but we're caught up in the evening news. We're caught up in the chaos of the day. We're caught up in some fatality or some disaster within our family. We're caught up within our own position in the materiality of life. We get caught up in these things, and that's still part of thinking. And if we're in those spaces in our consciousness in a non-affirming way, if you will, it's still creative, and it's still creating in our lives. And that's something we have to understand. The creation that we are responsible for is the creation that we create within our life. Now, through us, it does influence and express out in the greater world. But it's important that we understand right from the get. The law is exact and exacting. There's no wiggle room. One of my favorite sayings is when we go to the teaching that Jesus gave when he was asked, what is the most important law? And he says the greatest law of all is to love God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our mind. And he said, like unto it, he said we are to love our neighbors ourselves. Well, if God is all there is, when we talk about loving God, then that has to include us. We don't take second place behind God in our love for God. We realize that we are God expressed as us, and it's important that we get that understanding. Sometimes we limit ourselves in our life experience because we don't fully accept ourselves at the level of truth of who and what we are. But the other part of this is to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We love God as we love ourselves. We love ourselves as we love God, and we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And there's no wiggle room in that. And that's kind of a tough pill for some people to swallow, because we want to have our issues, if you will, with other philosophies, other beliefs, other understandings, other individuals, other differences, on and on and on. The list is as long as anybody wants to make it, but it's long for most people that aren't aware. And oftentimes we're not aware of it on the subjective side of our consciousness, where we hold, in the subjective mind, we hold beliefs, we hold memories, and we hold them there oftentimes at levels that we're not consciously aware of. But they're still having an effect on our day-to-day life expression and experience. All you have to do is ask yourself, are you experiencing limitation in any aspect of your life? If you are, there's some limiting belief that you hold. And we've got to be real with that. We can't be, we can't be flowery. We can't make this a platitude. We've got to know that if we say that we are experiencing all the prosperity that we are meant to experience in this life, and if our physical reality is less than that, then we got to start working on ourselves. One of the great metaphors that Ernest Holmes used was the idea of, as we're working to bring new beliefs and new thoughts into our mind, our consciousness, and our belief. It's kind of like getting rid of furniture in our home. We get rid of the old furniture and we bring in new furniture. And there may be some of the old furniture that's important that we keep, so we keep that. But the other stuff we get rid of. The new stuff we bring in, we bring it in. We grow beyond the old, but we're not tied to that. Realizing that there's more and greater and more exciting new stuff behind it. But to get to that, we've got to start where we're at and evolve in consciousness forward. And that's what we're doing when we talk about this. He says it must and will respond, the law, to everyone because it is law, and law is no respecter of persons. We are surrounded by an infinite force and substance from which all things come, the ultimate essence in the invisible and subjective world of all visible and objective forms and conditions. It's there, and it's there as potential, and it awaits us. It's no respecter of individuals. You may be the most wonderful person in your mind, but if your life is not reflecting that, the law is responding to you at the level of your belief. You know, we might be great salespeople to the people in our lives, but we can't outsell God. God knows us as we know ourselves. And sometimes that knowing us is at a level that we necessarily need to discover that we know about ourselves, but we're not willing to deal with, or haven't been up until now. But we're going to declare now that we're going to deal with it. We're going to declare now that we're going to move forward. We're going to declare now that we are better than what we've thought. That's starting where we're at. That's beginning to move forward. We're going to take our next break, and I'll see you when we come back.
Get your copy of Crouching Mama Hidden Veggies today, packed with recipes of delicious food cooked with hidden vegetables, so you can feel confident that you and your family are eating your veggies.
Contact Sprague Electric for all things electrical, solar installations, battery systems, troubleshooting, repairs, and more. Call 559-760-0712. SpragueElectric.com.
Are you or a member of your family beginning to show early signs of forgetfulness that may be Alzheimer's or dementia? The only way to be sure is through an expensive brain scan. Dr. Parminder Bhatia of the Neuropain Medical Center is helping in a clinical trial for those with memory problems, dementia, or mild Alzheimer's disease. Those accepted into the trial will have all costs paid for, from diagnosis to evaluations and trial medicine. There is no cost for those who are accepted in the trial, and there may even be some compensation for the patient's time and travel. For more information, call 559-437-9700, extension 310, and visit neuropain.com.
Hi, I'm the host of New Thought Talk, Reverend Steve Walling, and I want to take a moment today and give you an opportunity to support our ministry, support our show. You can do that through a PayPal payment. You send the payment through PayPal to the email address of Madera, MADERASAC @gmail.com. If you don't have a PayPal account, you can go down below the link and you can find where you can enter a debit or credit card. I want to thank those that have supported us and those that will continue to support us. You have a great day. Bye.
When you experience flooding in your home, you need to call Clean Master Emergency Flood Service at 559-213-9430. After soaking in water for only 45 minutes, carpet starts to come apart. Clean Master Emergency Flood Service can help, and not just with carpet repair. They also offer carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, carpet installation, and more. Call Clean Master Emergency Flood Service, and they'll be there in 60 minutes. Call 559-213-9430.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling. Moving forward, and I got a lot to cover, so we're going to move forward here. Holmes goes on in this section and he lays out that, if we don't believe that it's going to work for us, it works for us essentially by not working for us. And that's kind of a cute way of expressing a concept. But there's something more important to this, and that is that when we attempt to put this into practice in our lives and we're not seeing a demonstration, it's not because it's not working, because the law always works. The underlying teaching behind this is that on some level it's not working for us because there's a belief that holds us back, a belief that keeps us from aligning ourselves with principle, with God. Okay? And if we are willing to state, and we are willing to state, that God is love, anything that doesn't fit into that definition, if you will, is something that is a limiting factor in our own understanding, in our own life. So, and we'll cover more of this as we move along. He says, we are dealing with real life, with thoughts, impulses, emotions, etc. We are dealing with causation, capital C, with the divine principle, and with original cause. And we should be most careful how we deal with such powers and forces. In dealing with this subtle power of mind and spirit, we are dealing with a fluent force. It is forever taking form and forever deserting the form it takes, which it has taken. In other words, whatever that trend of thinking that's going through our mind, remember I talked about, if we hold anything in consciousness, in beliefs, that limits us in any way, that's going to express in our day-to-day life experience. And you know what? You know that it's limiting you when you look out in your life and you fail to see the good that you feel that you need, want, desire. Because the ultimate goal of your life is to live your life at a level that matches and meets your needs, wants, and desires. So if you're not there, we got some work to do. And there's nothing wrong with saying we got some work to do. You know, it's time to be truthful with ourselves, because it's within ourselves where the truth matters. It's within ourselves where the truth really lives. And at the level that we don't want to deal with that, at that level we have basically separated ourselves out from the unity which we call God or oneness. Okay, moving forward. He says, we should learn to control our thought processes and bring them into line with reality, reality being a capital R. He was talking about divine principles. Thought should tend more and more towards an affirmative attitude of mind that is positive, stable, and above all, toward a real unity with spirit that's already complete and perfect. God is perfect. There's not a time of day, there's not a point of our life where God is imperfect. But we see imperfection in our life, don't we? Why is that so? If God is all there is. That perfection we see in our life is the perfection. Remember, we talk about God working for us by first working through us. If working through us, we create that concept, that consciousness, that belief in imperfection, limitation in any way, doubt, fear, hate, anger, go on and on. Judgment doesn't make any difference. Then it's going to manifest in our life experience. And it's time we say no. It's time we say no more. It's time we choose to stand up for ourselves, to open ourselves up to the divine principle, infinite love, infinite good, infinite beauty, infinite harmony. These are the things that we should be experiencing, we desire to experience, and we have a way to experience them. And that's what Science of Mind and Spirit teaches. New thought. He says, a practitioner. And when we talk about practitioners in this sense, we're all practitioners. A philosophy, a faith, a way of living. We are practitioners in our own way of living, in our own life experience. He says, a practitioner uses thought definitely and for specific purposes, and the more definitely they use this law, the more directly it will respond to them. Okay, the more directly you use it, not only in what you do in your affirmative treatment, but the more directly that you put it into practice 24/7. Joel Goldsmith used to talk about practicing the presence of God. Practicing the presence of God is not just going around saying, well, I see God and all there is. Practicing the presence of God is practicing the presence of God within ourselves, aligning ourselves with that principle. And the amazing thing is, as much as we may sometimes want to argue that point because, we have certain individuals or groups of individuals or certain things or certain whatever that we want to be in disagreement with, at the level of our disagreement, we are declaring our separateness from the greater whole. And we don't have to do that. Okay, and it's hard sometimes to get to that point, but it's a point that we can all get to, and that's the beauty and the truth of what we teach here. We start right where we're at. We begin to move forward, and today and next week we're going to be talking about using the divine principle in creating greater good in our life. To use that principle, we've got to step up to the plate, if you will. We've got to be willing to look into the mirror of our consciousness, the mirror of our mind, and be looking for what we'll say are the warts or the disfigurements that are there. And not with the idea of hiding from them, not with the idea of being critical, but with the idea of looking at whatever those things are from a perspective of love and bringing love to that. And where are we doing that? We're doing it in here within ourselves. We're doing it with an embodied knowledge. We're doing it by putting into practice our spiritual tools. And we've talked about them in the past, and we'll talk about them in the future, but they're available to each and every one of us. We are all amazing beings. You are. We all are. That person that you just got mad at 5 minutes ago, that person you saw on the news last night, we're all amazing beings. When we open ourselves up to that, we not only create more amazing lives for ourselves, but we are in the process of creating a more amazing world to live in. And that's the incredible power that once we get this concept, we put it into practice in our lives. Moving forward, he says, while it is true that wrong conditions exist, they could not remain unless there were someone to experience them. When we talk about someone to experience them, we're not just talking about some victim out there. We're talking about us. We experience them. We are that someone, and they continue and will continue to exist as long as we choose to make that part of our experience. But the power and the powerful word, the point of that is choose, and we can make different choices. And we all know that sometimes we've made choices that haven't necessarily been in our best interest, but we all know that we can all make different choices at any point in time. One of the greatest powers that God gave its creation at a level of intelligence was the power to make choices. And that's what we're here to do, is to make different choices. Don't let the physical world determine and make choices for us. You know, when we see an injustice in the world, we have no issue within ourselves realizing and recognizing that injustice. The issue is realizing it and recognizing that the germ, if you will, of that injustice, the acceptance of that injustice in the world starts within us. And you say, wait a second, I refuse to accept that is in my life. We got to understand, it's not about going out in the world and trying to beat down that injustice. It's about going within ourselves and creating the love and light in there, that as it grows, that darkness diminishes. There's no power that can diminish that darkness other than the power of love. And the power of love is nothing that you can enforce on anybody, but it's something you create within yourself. And keep that in mind as we move forward. He says, change the consciousness and the false condition will disappear. Conditions are not entities, we are entities. Cannot that which is conscious cast out that which has no consciousness, he says. He says, he's got this. He says, if we properly understood, we would be able to remove the false conditions just as easily as the master teacher, Jesus, did. When he could look at something and realize that it had no foundation in ultimate truth, that it was not an expression of God, and he called it out in that level of consciousness at that level, not beating down people, not telling people how they had to do different things. He looked at them and he said, you know, pick up your bed and go forth. You know, you're healed. And he thanked God always. And thanking God is thanking principle. And that's nothing that we can, again, we can't do it outside of ourselves. It has to be done within here. But what a great concept. You know, the original concept, if you will, of gratitude for the good. Gratitude for the good that is here now. We may not see it, but we can own it within ourselves. As we own it within ourselves, we'll see it expressed in our life. So he says, analyze this. One finds oneself impoverished. They wish to change their condition. They know that it is not in accord with the ultimate reality, not with God, right? And that spirit imposes no limitation. Therefore, that individual knows that their apparent limited condition has no real law to support it. It is simply an experience of consciousness, and they wish to make a definite result in the opposite direction. First, they have to realize that the law of life is a law of liberty, of freedom. The law of life. That which binds us is still that which frees us. Once we understand it, once we put it into practice consciously in our life, once we address those issues within ourselves, once we go to ourselves in loving kindness and empowerment, and that's something that we all have the ability and the availability to do at any point in time. It's an amazing thing. He says, first we realize that the law of life is a law of liberty and of freedom, and now they now state that the law of liberty is flowing through themselves and into their affairs. Into ourselves, we make that statement. The law of life, the law of liberty, is flowing into ourselves. We make that as our declaration, if you will. You could kind of use that as the foundation, because the law of life and the law of liberty is the law of love, and the law of love is the law of God. But we have to be willing to open up within ourselves at a level of acceptance when we make that declaration. And oftentimes, we limit ourselves. We don't want to let it go. We're going to take our last break, and I'll see you when we come back.
Christy Majors is your local real estate connection. With a solid, hardworking team, traditional listings, short sales, probate listings, and foreclosures are treated in a personal and caring way and close in a timely fashion. Since 2009, Team Majors has closed more than $75 million worth of homes all over California. Reliable and trustworthy, Christy and her team will go the extra mile for every client, whether selling or buying a home. So give Team Majors a call at 559-464-5606 or visit teammajors.com.
After a tough day at the track, cleaning up can be a time-consuming task. That's why we use Extreme Cleaner, the non-toxic, biodegradable, multi-purpose cleaner and degreaser. Extreme Cleaner cuts through even the toughest of grease and grime. Fast. Great for cleaning tools and work surfaces. Extreme Cleaner. Tough on grime, safe on the environment. Visit extremecleaner.com to find a retailer near you.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling. I hope you've been enjoying today, and I've been moving at a pretty fast pace. There's a whole lot more that could be said, and there may be people out there that have said it, and you may have heard them, but I'm just trying to get as much covered as I can. I'm going to finish up. There is a point where Dr. Holmes begins to show us a an example of treatment, and I'm going to stop right before there, and I'll pick that up, when we get there next week. But he says, he's talking about an individual. He says, but the image of his limitation persists. This is after he's declared freedom, in his life, right? He says, here is a definite contradiction of his statements of freedom. Okay. Now, the deeper understanding of this is not only as we speak our word, okay, that we are accepting or we're declaring freedom, abundance, good, love, whatever it is in our life. But if we have an inner belief, and this goes back to really understanding that how our beliefs that we hold, that we're not even aware of that we hold, do create limitation within our life, at no matter what level we are in our spiritual practice. One of the things that daily practice does is it helps to, believe it or not, part of daily practice, part of your spiritual journey, if you will, is a journey of skill level. Part of the idea and the purpose behind daily practice is to grow that level of skill within ourselves. It's kind of like learning any other kind of skill, whether it be the skill of writing or the skill of playing an instrument or singing or whatever. Look at this as a skill. Look at it as a skill that you can grow. Many people come to New Thought and they give no thought to learning how to meditate daily in their life. They get it. They've been told meditation's important. Quieting the mind, getting to that space within themselves. And it also is a skill. They don't necessarily think of it as a skill, but they think of it as something that they can improve and they can grow. It's the same thing when we're talking about doing our affirmative treatment, doing our other spiritual tool, or using our other spiritual tools. They are skills that we can grow, and don't ever feel that you are not, or that you don't have what it takes to grow. Sometimes in our own belief of our inferiorness because things that we experienced growing up, that maybe someone else can do these things. Maybe someone else can be successful. Maybe someone else can declare God in their life and see it expressed. Maybe somebody else, and all of that is just a lie. Because the truth is, if it wasn't for God expressing as you, you wouldn't be here. Well, if you're God expressing as you, at what part are you going to sell God out in this life experience that you're experiencing? Okay, you're in a tough spot, or things are not working for you. But there is the gift that God has given us of that infiniteness of potential that we can tap into. So we work at it. We start right where we are. Ernest Holmes tells us, start right where we are. And we begin to move forward. And we move forward each and every day, working every day, practicing. And, it doesn't require that we set aside all this time in the day. It requires that we just begin. And maybe we do set aside a certain amount of time, a little bit of time to begin with, but we make a commitment to doing it each and every day, learning a little more, treating a little more, meditating a little more, growing a little more within ourselves, and seeking to see, and this also is a skill, seeking to see good in things that heretofore we maybe made judgments that they weren't good things. We can find good in anything when we begin to realize that we can find good in anything. We have to train ourselves to look for it, but it's there because it's all God expressing. Moving forward, he says right here, when we get to that point, we're recognizing we got some stuff, right? Holmes says right here, we got to stop and declare that these images, beliefs, understandings, whatever it is within ourselves of limitation are neither person, place, nor thing. They have no power in reality. They are created as a result of beliefs that we've held, inerrant thoughts that we've accepted as true, and we've allowed them to play out in our life. And he says, they have no power, personality, or presence, no real law to support them. He does not believe in them. And he, meaning you, when you're realizing this, make that declaration. I don't believe that I am less than. I don't believe that there's limitation in my life. I don't believe that love is something that I can't experience. I can experience abundance. I can experience good. I can experience positivity. I can experience, and go on and on. And if there's something that seems to be a little raw, approach it, but approach it from a position of love, and love yourself. It's what God is, what God does. You are love expressed as you. You know, when you begin to name it and claim it, if you will, you begin to see it unfold in your life in many awesome and wonderful and incredible ways. Forget about what's going on out in the world that you have no control over. You have control over what's going on in the world within you. And the amazing thing is, as you change that, your outer world begins to change. So moving forward, he says, he declares that they're free from influence of the negative things, right? Forever. Not just for a little bit, but forever. He declares, or he then begins to fill his thought with the idea of faith, the expectancy of good, the realization of plenty. That they begin to sense and mentally see right action in their life. Going back to what we talk about, beliefs that we hold that we're not aware of. Can we declare that we can mentally see a greater good in areas where unknown beliefs have limited ourselves? You betcha we can. You know, we don't have to spend years in self-discovery of, you know, whatever. And this is not a rap on psychology or counseling. You know, if you feel you need it, by all means, you know, get yourself there. But we don't have to necessarily peel back the onion, if you will, to get to that core. We can strike our arrow directly into the heart by doing that which we have available to us at any time, and that's by going to source, to God, to Spirit, and making that declaration. Okay? We may have to go it a little bit at a time, and we'll talk about one of the things that I really like about Larson is an issue that he addressed in his book called What is Truth? And he talks about the power of subjectively held beliefs and when we're seeking to create change in our life. And I've talked about it in the past, we'll talk about it in the future. I don't want to spend any more time today on it, but they're very powerful, and we need to address those. And you can find Larson PDF formats, What is Truth? It's online. Go for it, read it. I think it's like in the first 24, 25 pages, something like that. Anyway, he says, at this point of realization, this individual meets a friend, and I'm not going to go through this scenario, but okay, we're working at making change. We're declaring good in our life. We're doing affirmations, right? And the next thing you know, we run into our, whoever it is, our neighbor, our friend, a coworker, and you know they're back in their old stuff. You know, the stuff that you were living with yesterday that you've determined that you don't want to live with today, and they're spewing that stuff, right? What are you going to do? Well, you got some options. You don't have to be offensive when you deal with them, but you know you can tell your individual that, you know, say, you know what, I'm really working on seeing something better in life, and I realize that I'm not going to see anything better as long as I keep hammering on things that are of a negative nature or whatever. You know, you can, if you're strong enough, you can just say to yourself, within yourself, that's where that individual is. I love them where they're at. I'm not going to let that affect me. And if you can do that, by all means, you know, go for it. There's other ways of addressing it. The thing is that we can recognize it for what it is and refute it within our own mind, hearts, and consciousness. And that we need to do. You really shouldn't let that get by. You just never know what's going to drop down into that subjective mind and come back at some point in time later to, you know, be a limiting factor. We want to get rid of that in our lives, okay? He says, the time will come when we let our conversations be in heaven, in our consciousness, in our minds. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is to be found within. Think about it. I want to finish this up. We're right at the end of the show. So we can refuse to talk about, read about, think about those things that ought not be. But someone will say, should we refuse to look at sickness, poverty, and unhappiness? This is not what we are discussing. He says, we will not refuse to help the helpless or lift up the fallen. but we will refuse to wallow in the mud because of our sympathies. And the rest of and if the blind lead the blind, they shall fall in the ditch. Matthew 15:14. Of all people in the world, the ones who have come the nearest to touching the seamless garment of truth have been the most sympathetic and the greatest lovers of the race. Of the race, the human race. He says, Jesus said, and if I be lifted up and not dragged down, I will draw all men unto me. We're going to leave it right there for today. If I be lifted up, we can take the world with us. It's an amazing thing. Ernest Holmes, he believed that we can reach a level of consciousness at some point where we will change humanity. Before I close this off next week, I'm going to share a little something I found in a book on our population in New Thought, where it was, and you can figure out where it is today. Anyway, I hope you have appreciated this. If you have a copy of the textbook, we're reading How to Use It. I've got to page 55, and we'll pick it up there, and we'll finish this off. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am in sharing it. I'll see you next week. Know that as you go through the week that the light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you. The presence of God watches over you. Because truly, wherever you are, God is there. And if God is there, all is well always. At the level you're willing to receive it, at that level, God's willing to give it to you and more. Love you. See you next week.